In this short demo, I'll show you how to create a simple workflow that will set permissions to an item based on the information we have inputted in one of the fields of the item. We have a list that has only two fields. One is title and the other is points of contact. This field is a standard SharePoint field, people picker. It allows us to input user information. For example, we want to add Anna here. We can search for Anna and just add her to the list. We would like to have the permissions set for the users who are listed in this field and not allow any other users to view these items. So let's start by creating a very simple workflow. We'll create a workflow, we'll call it permissions. The job of this workflow will be only to set the permissions to the item and stop working. Of course, you can incorporate this functionality into bigger workflows and make this functionality a part of another workflow. So let's create a first action that will just go from start to end. This action will be launched automatically when the item is created. Now let's add activity that will change permissions for the current item. We'll use the item permissions activity. In the SharePoint list, we'll pick the current list, so we'll modify item on the current list. In the filter list item field, we'll put ID equals to the current item ID. This way we'll modify the current item. Now we want to make sure that users will have input in the field will have the full permissions to the item and no one else will have the permissions. So we'll first pick the permission level. It's going to be the full permissions. Of course, if we want to, we might choose, for example, only read permissions or design permissions and so on, but in this scenario we want to give full permissions to the users. You need to make sure that this checkbox, delete existing permissions, is checked, because if you do not check this checkbox, the permissions will be appended to existing ones. In this scenario, we want to erase all permissions and only add the permissions we are defining here. Now we want to add the users. We'll pick the users from the current item field. I have picked the use lookup ID, and now I'll change from the ID to points of contact. This way we'll get logins of the users that are inputted in this field, and it will give those users permissions full control to the current item. Let's see how it works. We'll deploy the workflow. Okay, the workflow was deployed. We can now return to our list. We'll return to the list itself, and now let's log in as some standard user, for example, Anna. Okay, we'll now create an item. Let's call it new item 1, and let's say that Anna should have permissions to the item and maybe Tom. Now we'll need to wait for a few seconds for the workflow to run for the first time. We see that when the workflow is running, the new columns appear. We can later on get rid of those columns because we don't need them here. You can see that the workflow was finished, and now you can see that Anna still has permissions. If we, for example, log in as Jack, you can see that the item is not visible. Let's now see what are the permissions for the item. Let's log in again as Anna. And let's see the permissions. You can see that Anna and Tom have full control to the item, and no other user can view the item. So the permissions are working properly. Let's do one more test. Let's see if we do not input Anna, will she be able to view the item still? Let's say it's going to be Jack and Tom. You can see that she still views the item, but because the workflow has not run, it takes a few seconds for the item to run. You can see now the workflow has finished and the item has disappeared. Let's log in as Jack. You can see now Jack doesn't have permissions to the item number 1, but sees the item number 2. And this concludes our short tutorial.